Okay, now we're going to be talking about states of consciousness. First, we have to basically define, well, what is consciousness? It is our awareness of ourselves and our environment under conditions of arousal, various states of arousal, low arousal, high arousal, whatnot. Consciousness. You're aware of what is going on around you. Okay? And there are different areas of the brain that control our levels of awareness. There are different areas of the brain that controls our levels of arousal. So, for example, our awareness of our surroundings is prefrontal cortex, anterior cingulate, and association areas. You could look at our sense of awareness as a global brain workspace where basically different areas of the brain are processing information about what is going on around us, and they're working in parallel. So that's that parallel processing. But nevertheless, we can be integrating all of the stuff that is going on in our brain, these different processes working in parallel. And essentially, so in other words, it's not just simply one single area of our brain that makes us aware of our surroundings, different areas working together. Now, our arousal, our level of, for example, we can be awake and alert, or we could be relaxed and drowsy. The reticular activating system is involved in our sense of arousal. And so how hyped up we are. So if we're really, really alert and ready to roll, or we're kind of drowsy and ready to fall asleep. So bottom line is our consciousness is our awareness of our surroundings under varying conditions of arousal. Okay, so when we think about different states of consciousness, there are different ways in which we could be aware of our surroundings and aroused. For example, when we are daydreaming. In this case, typically our arousal level is pretty low. Oftentimes if we're daydreaming, we might even, drop in and fall asleep. So our arousal level is fairly low. And our alertness is also fairly low. If we're daydreaming, we're not paying attention to the teacher lecturing in front of the classroom, for example. We are not quite as alert as we would be if we are focused on something. But the daydream is an example of something that can occur spontaneously. We can be just kind of going about our daily business, driving a car, and we can slip into daydreaming easily. Drowsiness, if we're feeling a little bit tired, it's getting late, you slip into drowsiness. Likewise, when we are asleep, we can fall into a dreaming state, and so we can start dreaming, and this can kind of occur spontaneously. Sometimes we can induce those states of consciousness physiologically. Hallucinations can be caused by different kinds of psychoactive drugs like marijuana or LSD. Orgasm is a physiological process during the sexual response cycle, and it goes, certainly an increased state of arousal and alertness during orgasm. And finally, if you are if you're food, if you're in starvation, you can kind of change your states of consciousness. You become a lot less alert, a lot less lower arousal level to kind of slow yourself down to be able to put yourself in survival mode. Some can be psychologically induced. You can be put in a state of sensory deprivation that could perhaps cause you to have hallucinations. But again, this is something, psychologically induced. Hypnosis, we'll talk a little bit about hypnosis and meditation a little bit later on, but those are different, those can be talked about as different states of consciousness as well. When we're very much aware of what is going on, our level of arousal is fairly high. We are focused. This is a higher level consciousness. We're control processing. We are focused on the thing that we are doing. We are goal directed. We're actively trying to reach a goal. And we are paying attention. Now remember we were talking about with sensation and perception, the importance of paying attention to something, realizing you're not paying attention to everything around you, but you're selectively paying attention to something. But that's what you're focusing your awareness on, and your awareness of the things going around you is a lot more limited. In our lower levels of consciousness, we are our arousal is lower, our awareness of the world around us is a little bit lower. Sometimes, they are, with these automatic processes that are going on. You can be kind of, an example of this is driving. When you're just learning how to drive a car, you're very consciously attending to every step you need to take. Okay, this is where I turn the ignition. This is where I shift into drive. This is now where I turn the wheel, and so on and so on and so on. And you're kind of working through every step sequentially. Well, now when you're an experienced driver, you just really do it automatically, and the processes are kind of going on. And that's why when you're an experienced driver, you can be, driving, and of course, unfortunately, you could be, distracted driving. A lot of you might want to text when you're driving, which is not a good idea. But because you get so accustomed to the automatic process of driving, you realize you can do other things as well. But be careful about doing that with driving. Daydreaming, again, you have wandering thoughts, fantasy that comes into your mind, and it could be useful. Oftentimes, creative ideas come from daydreaming that you might have. I wonder if blah 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 blah. The things that you wonder about may end up in the future becoming reality. So always leave time for daydreaming, by the way. Don't be guilty about daydreaming. Daydreaming is a good thing to kind of get you off of, you get your mind thinking about something else occasionally. But again, don't be doing 90% daydreaming and 10% studying when you're trying to study for my exams. Some altered states of consciousness that can come about, again, from drugs, from fatigue or illness, your meditation, hypnosis. Also, mental disorders can also result in some altered states of consciousness. When we think about subconscious awareness, there are things in which we might be aware of something, but only at a subconscious level, where we are, at some level, we are aware of a particular event going on, but we may not consciously be aware of what is going on. If you think about subliminal messages, for example, we might be responsive to it to some degree. It doesn't mean we're going to be turned into mindless machines, but we are. But we definitely, have some level of awareness at some level of these stimuli, and they could have some small influence on us. And this incubation, the idea that you can have some thought that might kind of prime us into thinking about something else in the later on, the incubation idea. The subconscious awareness, the idea, these thoughts that might be going on at lower levels, these automatic processes might be going on alongside the conscious activities that you're doing. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. When you're asleep, your level of consciousness is low, but is certainly not absent. When you are asleep, you are indeed conscious. But again, the level of consciousness is low. Your level of alertness is obviously low. And finally, if you're not aware of anything going on, if you are unconscious, if you're knocked out unconscious, as one thing, but you could also be thinking about, from what Freud is talking about, the memories and thoughts that you might have suppressed, that you might have kept out of your consciousness because you don't want to think about them. Those are in your unconscious, according to Freud. And there are also non-conscious processes that are going on. There are things that we do without being aware. shaking of our foot, for example, when we're sitting down. We may not be aware of the fact that we're doing it, but nevertheless we're doing it anyway.